Hello, thanks for tuning in. Healing the HPA axis, part 3005. Thanks for tuning in. So I get the question a lot, how to heal the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And of course, there are strategies. You can check out other videos on this channel in terms of how to do that. Just basic nuts and bolts of that. Decrease the inflammatory type foods, decrease the toxins that you are ingesting in the forms of poor food choices or smoking or alcohol, etc. One of the things I haven't spoken to as much would be the emotional, psychological ingestion and emotions that can lend themselves really to destabilization of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. If you're confused, that's okay. I'm going to explain this. So, one of the observations that I've made in terms of the polyvagal theory would be there are certain kinds of coping mechanisms that very clearly belong in one part of the stress response, the autonomic stress response, through the polyvagal lens. Meaning parasympathetic is at the top, that would be the rest and digest space, but also social engagement if you follow Stephen Porges. Below that would be the fight or flight response, right? This is an autonomic response to a perceived threat. And then the freeze response, which would be when the fight or flight situation doesn't work out, can't get away from the lioness, and now you drop into freeze. And that is a space that does give you certain advantages if you are about to die. When it comes to being caught in this cycle of really hanging out in fight or flight, the sympathetic response based on complex PTSD, trauma, anxiety, and also dropping into freeze, those spaces kind of go together. One observation of a certain kind of tool that belongs with the bottom of the hierarchy, but not really at the top, would be the coping strategy of splitting. So splitting is this way of polarizing the world into good versus evil, predator versus safe or prey. Two very basic boxes with rigid lines between them, and there's not any room in between for gray. This is useful if you are on the African savanna and the lioness over there, you need to assess danger or not. You don't need a bunch of nuances in terms of, well, is the lioness in a good mood today? And is she really not hungry and just wants to snuggle next to my leg like a big cat? Or, right, no, you don't need that. You need a rapid assessment as to danger to get the hell out of there. So the coping mechanism of splitting, comes out of that context. The problem is if you're trying to stabilize the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and you're utilizing this particular coping mechanism as a way to deal with situations that are stressful or stressful people or etc., this doesn't give you very many nuances, and in fact, when it comes to social engagement, undermines connection with other people, undermines relationships, because for the most part, the world isn't black and white. It's not that simple. It oversimplifies matters, and then it falls short. And so what about the gray areas? Well, you've got no room for that. And so in my experience, if this is a go-to strategy for coping with the world, I suspect it can actually trigger destabilization of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and putting someone back into fight or flight or freeze. I mean, it's pretty common that splitting as a coping mechanism shows up with, one of the cluster B personality disorders quite pronounced. I mean, quite as a go-to strategy. I mean, borderline personality disorder, this is one of the keynotes. And it tends to undermine a lot of their interpersonal relationships. And if you're going to talk about a dysregulation, emotional dysregulation, borderline personality disorder might be one of the most dysregulated personality disorders out there. And so looking at it through that lens, that you've got potential that by association, if you're using this strategy, then all of a sudden that strategy can take you into a landscape of fight or flight or freeze and trigger such a thing for you. So getting away from this being your diet, your psychological diet of this is how you see the world, split into two, and ingesting that less is going to be useful in terms of strategizing how to restabilize the HPA axis. That's it. Thanks for tuning in. This is helpful, useful. Please don't hesitate to give me a thumbs up. And I'll see you in the next video. Adios.